How did ALS start for you or your loved one? Did you have any strange coincidences? My mom was diagnosed after she recovered from COVID. I was in a state of denial for quite some time, believing it was her arthritis or long COVID. Story 1.
She had cramps in her calves and hands, then falls, then foot drop. My mother was clumsy AF all her life, so we just assumed it was arthritis and usual gait issues, especially after a clean EMG. It wasn't until we had to hoot and holler at the doctors to get another EMG done a few months later that it was confirmed. The denial comes and goes. It trades places with anger, sometimes with acceptance. It's a journey.
Story 2.
My mom's first symptom was slurred speech. I actually thought she might be a secret alcoholic at one point. She was diagnosed 6 months later.
Story 3.
My first symptom was weakness in my right hand. I could not open a bottle of water or tie a shoelace. Even a frying pan seemed heavier to hold.
Story 4.
My first symptom was a slurred word here or there. It became more real when others noticed it. It took 14 months from the first symptoms to diagnosis, with a lot of we don't think it's physical, but mental. Sadly, I was right all along.
Story 5.
My husband had slurred speech. I was sure he had a stroke. He was diagnosed the next morning. I am grateful the neurologist recognized it right away, but at the same time, I kept thinking that if it had been a stroke, we would have had a path to some sort of recovery. He was diagnosed in February 2023. Looking back, there was weakness in his hands, fumbling with buttons and bottle caps. We kind of wrote it off as getting older and things not being as easy as they used to be.
Story 6.
My dad had weight loss and muscle loss. He seemed to age a decade in only 6 months. I remember one day noticing how small and tired he looked. It took a year to get a diagnosis.
Story 7.
My mom noticed stiffness in her legs that felt unlike anything she had ever experienced before. She said it was hard to describe, but her legs and knees felt like they locked up. She began to fall because her legs would suddenly give out.
Story 8.
9 months ago, I thought I pulled a muscle in my right groin. Then my right thigh felt heavy and my right knee hurt. I started limping but ignored it. The doctor sent me for an MRI on my knee and PT. It became hard to walk, and then the twitching started in my right leg. My right arm felt weaker while working out. By Christmas, the right arm was twitching too, and the limp was very pronounced. In January, the doctor suspected ALS and sent me to a neurologist. By my February appointment, I was using a walker and my right arm was very weak. My left arm and leg started twitching and declining. Now my right leg barely moves and my right arm is very stiff. My right hand has very little grip. I had to retire and move to a house without steps. This sucks for all of us.
Story 9.
My dad went to jail and apparently had an accident where he fell pretty badly while on wood chopping duty. He was put on administrative duties and given gabapentin. He lost some weight during the 6 months he was there. He was 60 and about 250 pounds and came back closer to 230. Slowly, over the next 2 years, his hands began to weaken to the point where he couldn't hold or use forks and knives anymore. By about a year and a half in, he was almost fully quadriplegic. He was fortunate to receive a free pivoting wheelchair and soon after a fully motorized one from the local ALS society. They even eventually got him a Stephen Hawking-type computer he could use to scroll Facebook with just a camera and a reflective dot on his forehead. 6 months before he passed, he moved into a full-time care facility. The only option was a palliative dementia ward. I went every day after work to keep him sane, as the only people he could talk to were the staff. He eventually developed breathing issues and was hospitalized for antibiotics, which didn't work like they had before for bacterial pneumonia. He was released with low expectations and brought a CPAP machine back to the care home. He stayed in the best spirits he could, but was completely bedridden from that point on. A few days later, he passed in his sleep. The entire process took about 2 years. I try to be thankful for every day and do my best not to take any day for granted.
Story 10.
My dad got COVID and recovered. He used to exercise like cycling and one day he fell off his bike. We all believed he had injured his right arm, but he didn't go to the doctor for a long time. Then we noticed he couldn't move his arm and was having issues with the left arm as well, so he finally went to the doctor. They did 3 surgeries because we believed it was a tendon issue, and we waited for recovery. Then he started losing mobility in his legs, and eventually he couldn't move without help. I wasn't in my country when all this happened. I last saw him a year ago when he could still move his left arm, so I'm not fully aware of all the progression. Months later he told me he couldn't move at all, so he went to a neurologist. After many tests they concluded it was ALS. He was officially diagnosed in August and passed away on October 31st.
Story 11.
I was in first grade. My dad, part owner of a TV repair shop, was having trouble walking. One week in 1964, my parents flew to the Mayo Clinic for the official diagnosis of Lou Gehrig's disease. I wasn't old enough to understand right away, but I read about Gehrig in the school library and knew life as I knew it was going to change. I spent my grade school years watching him deteriorate along with the rest of my family. They gave him 2 years. He lived 6, and it wasn't exactly a blessing. There were no strange coincidences. I lived in fear for decades that I had inherited it until I tested negative in the 90s.
Story 12.
My mom was diagnosed in February 2023. She had some symptoms in 2020 after COVID started and after getting vaccines. She experienced tingling throughout her body and described a strange, unpleasant sensation that shot from her feet to the top of her body, giving her goosebumps. She had her first and only known COVID infection in March 2022, and everything went downhill after that. By July 2022, we knew something was seriously wrong. She started slurring her words and losing her balance, and she fell and broke her arm at one point. By the end of the year, she was extremely small from weight and muscle loss, having lost over 60 pounds. She couldn't eat without choking. We had to fight to get a diagnosis. We had to fight to get her a feeding tube she desperately needed. We've had to fight for everything she's needed. She is still alive over a year after diagnosis, but it's not good. She has very little mobility. We do everything for her. She can't speak at all, only makes sounds. She has bowel incontinence, a catheter, constant drooling that requires a suction machine even with medication, and she uses a breathing machine at night in her hospital-style bed. We have to transfer her from chair to car to commode to bed. It's unbelievably hard, and she does not deserve to be living like this. I'm so angry and upset. She's 62 and should still have many years left. I constantly worry about the end of her life. I don't want it to happen, and I know she's scared too.
Story 13.
My mom's speech was slurred in the summer, and they thought she was having a stroke. That was ruled out. They moved on to testing for thyroid issues. During that time, her neurologist continued testing and gave a suspected diagnosis in the fall, which was confirmed in December after blood tests, an MRI, and a muscle test. I don't know the technical term. It involved needles in her muscles to test responses.
Story 14.
I've been reading so many comments over the last few days about first symptoms. I've noticed muscle twitching, usually around my biceps and thighs. It lasts a few seconds and mostly happens at rest. I've had stomach issues, GERD-related, we think, for about a year and very frequent headaches. Of course, you Google muscle twitching and ALS pops up. Every time I read about someone's weakness or atrophy, I wonder how severe it was when they first noticed it, like I'm noticing these slight twitches now. Before you couldn't open a Pepsi bottle, before weight loss and atrophy, before constant cramping and foot drop, were there signs you brushed off as nothing? Or did you wake up one day and suddenly realize you couldn't use your hands? I'm genuinely curious and don't want to sound insensitive, but some of these sound like major symptoms, and I feel there must have been minor ones that only made sense in hindsight. Full disclosure, no one in my family has had ALS, but no one had heart disease or cancer either. By age 32, I've already had 2 heart surgeries and survived cancer after being born healthy. Looking back, there were small signs we thought were normal that were actually precursors, which is why I'm asking. Thank you.
Story 15.
It started in my dad's right arm. Doctors thought it was a cervical issue and performed surgery that should have fixed it. It didn't. Months of testing followed with no answers. He finally saw a specialist, was diagnosed in September 2019, and passed in May 2020. He refused a ventilator and feeding tube. Watching him decline so fast was terrible, but he handled it with grace and a positive attitude. I miss him every day. He said he could feel everything, just couldn't move. It started with right arm weakness, dropping things, not being able to hold them. Then no movement at all. His legs weakened next, leading to falls. Then swallowing became difficult. Hospice arrived on a Friday. He was gone by Sunday morning.
Story 16.
I watched my brother slowly die from ALS. I didn't know it was familial ALS until much later. He was older at onset, 48, and it was bulbar initially. My dad even asked if he'd been drinking. 4 years later, my dad, 75, developed gait issues after what he thought was sciatica and GERD. He'd also had limbs falling asleep in bed since his 30s, treated by elevating the bed and drinking quinine. After symptoms started, it progressed rapidly. He was gone in under a year. My brother lasted over 5. It wasn't until my dad had genetic testing that we learned it was familial. I hope there's a cure soon.
Story 17.
I'm struggling with many ALS-related issues as I type this. I've debated whether to keep this private and quietly begin my diagnosis journey. While I would love to find out it's not ALS, if I were a betting man, based on my symptoms, intermittent muscle aches, cramps, and strains, mostly in my limbs, constant muscle twitching and spasms throughout the day, tripping and falling, speech issues, mixing up words and thoughts, occasional drooling mid-sentence, coordination problems, often dropping things, constant fatigue, unable to do physical activities with my kids, obvious muscle definition loss compared to older photos, grand mal seizure in 2022. I've been struggling, even deciding whether to go through this privately, but something about this thread truly helped. Thanks, y'all.
Story 18.
I want to be respectful, and I'm only venting. I'm furious. I believe the environmental trigger for my mother's bulbar onset ALS was a severe systemic reaction to her first COVID vaccine. I don't care what anyone says, and I know it will never be proven. God will act in his own time. My mother's funeral was this past Friday. She passed away on the 15th.